Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube, and it's time, Sam. It's playoff time. Playoff time. Super wild card weekend. We've got 6-hour show planned for today for 6 games. Is that how we're going to do it?
Yeah. See, we need the hot button so that anytime we mention the playoffs, we're going to hit Jim Mara.
Oh man, when we get to the new studio, at some point. Which we're looking for. If you're in Cincinnati and you have studio space for us, let us know. Once we get to the new studio, we get the
If you rent office space, contact us at
I'm sure there's so many people.
Check the mic at the3013.com.
I'm sure there's so many people that are waiting to give us office space. But yeah, we'll get the playoffs.
Yeah,
from Jim Mora.
It's not bad.
Thank you.
It's not as good as your Peter King.
My Peter King impersonation. Yeah, I haven't dusted that off in a while. I have to go. Maybe I'll practice. We'll bring it out in a few weeks here. We should have Peter back on the show. See him making the rounds.
Well, he's not busy anymore, right?
No, he's got nothing to do.
He's
retired. He's not staying up till 6 in the morning every.
He's just like hanging
Sunday
out with
night.
grandkids and stuff.
Yeah, real stuff. So yeah, we've got 6 game previews to go through today, and had a great show yesterday. Had to talk a lot about a lot of the coaching changes and everything. So if your team just made a coaching change, whether it's head coach or general manager switch, coordinator changes, we broke all that down yesterday, so go check that out. So yeah, we're going to go game by game on Super Wildcard Weekend here. It's all brought to you by PrizePicks. We'll be unveiling Sam's lineup for PrizePicks later today, and we'll review mine as well.
I had a horrible little moment there where I was like, oh, wait, did I do a PrizePicks? No, I did. It's okay. We're good.
Yeah, you get your PrizePicks.
Yeah. I'll put it in. We're fine.
So what was I going to say? Where were we?
It's hard to tell.
Yeah, we got our 6 games.
Yeah,
we're gonna go game by game. There's no sleeper app picks. That the sleeper picks ended with the regular season.
So I was correct to announce the champion.
So champion, did we ever get?
I don't think so.
A response.
It occurred to me though that he must be in the Discord because that's where the league originated, right?
We'll
in order to sign up to the Discord or to sign up to the sleeper league, you need to be in the Discord. So we just need him to reach out to me in the Discord. That's probably the easiest way of doing that. Let me.
And the YouTube chat is giving out bacon over here.
Yeah, I see that. Chris Budge is his name, Budge. So Chris Budge, reach out to me on Discord, and we will get you hooked up with some merch.
All right, congrats. We'll go over our season-long bets in a little bit as well.
Yeah, the punter guy, our punters are people too person, the punter-obsessed individual.
That was the Caleb Williams.
So, yeah, I mean, he lost the bet, and he's a man of his word. He's already offering us the coffee. He was, however, like he did the thing that we tell people not to do, you know? He made it contingent on multiple things. You get one, you got a chance of it coming off, right? You start hanging extra things on it, you almost certainly fall foul of that.
It's overconfidence.
So his bet was that, because remember the thing was that Caleb Williams had told the punter, like, don't worry, kid, you're not going to be punting much this year. And it turns out he was actually punting a lot this year. So he bet that the punter, Tory Taylor, would have more punting yards than Caleb Williams had passing yards, which did happen. But he also bet that he would have a higher punting grade than Caleb Williams would have offensive grade, and there he fell a couple of points short.
Oh, so yeah.
So if he'd gone just the yardage thing, he'd have won, but he didn't.
Well, yeah, we'll get through those in the next couple weeks. Also, let us know. We've got a little bit more time now that we have fewer games to preview and review. If there's any draft discussion, off-season discussion you want us to get a head start on over the next few weeks, let us know. All right, let's go. 6 games. It all starts Saturday at 4:30. The Texans time slot, the official Texans time slot. It's the Chargers at the Texans. Chargers favored by 2.5 here on the road in Houston. So I forget who put the tweet out, but this was 8 straight Houston playoff games where they get the Saturday afternoon time slot during the wild card round. Pretty awesome.
Every single time they've made the playoffs 8 times in the franchise's history since being created, and every single time they've been in the early Saturday slot.
The curtain jerker, as they say sometimes.
I don't like that term.
What?
At all.
That's what they.
It's just not a pleasant sounding term.
It's not.
I just don't like it.
Just say it's a showbiz term. But that's what the Texans.
It's like the way some people react to the word moist. It's
yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Curtain jerker, just no.
Let's
don't
retire
like
that.
It. Don't
we'll
like
retire
it.
That
don't want to hear it.
From Check the Mic. By the way, real quick, I see you're wearing your merch. I just ordered my merch.
Well, you ordered some.
Yeah, I'm gonna get that. I'm gonna get the Check the Mic hoodie.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna get my Steve mug. which my family, I mean, they're all sold out because my family bought so many of them.
It's a real shame.
Or fans.
Yeah.
So yeah, got my Check the Mic merch coming in.
Nice. Yeah, this is I like this one. This is the Stop the Shouty Show hoodie thing, but also extra stuff on the back.
I've got feelers out for someone who would be a great guest during Shouty Show time.
Yeah.
See if he or she responds.
Okay.
Anyway, Chargers Texans. To me, the big storyline here, right? Texans, look, stumbling in.
Yeah.
To the playoffs, stumbling against good teams, right? Lost to the Chiefs, lost to the Ravens in week 16 and 17. They don't feel like they're, heading into the playoffs at a good time here, even though, they beat the Titans on Sunday. Cancel your phone.
It's somebody trying to offer a studio space.
You can answer it if you want.
No, I don't.
Monologue.
I mean, it's one of those things where you put in your details,
Did somebody watch the YouTube and call you?
No, it's one of the ones I like requested information for yesterday. But it's like, email me. I put my email in. The request is via text, email. I want digital communication back. I don't want you to phone me up. I don't want to do it. I don't want to talk to you on the phone until I discover whether or not your premises is suitable for what I'm looking for.
It's easier over the phone type of person.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you looking for in this Chargers-Texans game? And the Texans stumbling into the playoffs as a storyline.
Yeah, well, that, I guess, can they kind of right the ship? But more, can C.J. Stroud sort of individually take control of this and say, I'm going to shoulder the burden here? Because the offense overall has not been great. The knives are out for our friend Bobby Slowick. He's gone from flavor of the month last year. This time a year ago, he was a hot coaching candidate. He was being offered head coaching jobs. And now, his own team, his own fan base, trying to run him out of the building, right?
And he is still interviewing for jobs, right? That hasn't gone away.
But, things have fallen apart a bit on the offensive side. It's largely, I think, injury-driven. I mean, the offensive line was bad on paper heading into the season. The whatever witchcraft and hex the Shanahan offensive schemes had in limiting the impact of bad offensive lines has disappeared this year. I don't know quite why that is, if it's a one-to-one relationship with anything that's happened this year, but it's whatever it is, it's stopped being a thing, right? So what has been a bad offensive line on paper for a long time is a bad offensive line and is getting worse, or has been getting worse with all the injuries that they've had. So that makes everything worse. That takes away the run game to a large degree, particularly because it's the interior. So the kind of the losses are coming right up the middle quickly. It impacts what C.J. Stroud can do. He's obviously had receivers go down. Stephon Diggs earlier in the year, Tank Dell with his horrendous injury as well. So that's a very pared down receiving core compared to what it was supposed to be. So generally the offense is it's struggling. But I think C.J. Stroud in both college and the NFL has demonstrated in isolated games that he has had his best games in the most impactful situations, right? Playoffs, college football playoffs, against the best teams he's faced. That's when Stroud has been able to turn it on. Is that a repeatable skill, or is that just it's happened a couple of times and it's anecdotal and it doesn't actually matter this time?
Yeah, just to add some context to what you're saying as far as the offensive line goes, and then I'll respond to the Stroud stuff. I mean, 7th worst, just looking at PFF grade among tackles, guards, and centers. So you just add up the offensive linemen. Texans are 7th worst in the league, 5th worst if you just look at run blocking. Some of the other stuff I think that's popped up for this offense, and why. I mean, there's reasons why an offensive coordinator is under fire, right? A lot of times it's, he runs it too much and too many first down this and this. But they've looked just bad when other teams have blitzed or run any sort of twist games up front, right? The number of times where there's a free rusher that is unaccounted for. And just, we have varying levels of NFL fans here, right? We have some NFL executives and all the way down to newbie type of fans. So got to explain. Sometimes you just got to explain stuff simply. But the unblocked rusher isn't always on the blocking, right? A lot of times it's on the quarterback. That's, he's going to be hot off of that guy. You expect him to come, and then you're going to throw the ball generally behind him. But with Houston, it's not that. They have not had good blitz answers. They have not picked up stunts very well. They've got the 7th worst pass blocking grade when blitzed. They've got the 5th worst EPA per play against stunts. And the Chargers don't do any of this stuff a lot, but they have all of these things in their bag, right? I think they do all the gap exchange stuff really well. I think that they do a nice job containing and compressing the pocket, and they do a nice job when needed with sim pressures and blitzes and different things like that. So I think those are the types of things that they can lean into. And ultimately, you're right. I mean, if those things aren't solved, it's like, all right, Stroud, go get him. And Jim Harbaugh had a great breakdown. He's recruited C.J. Stroud, and Stroud went to Ohio State. Of course, Harbaugh was at Michigan, and he's saying the number of times that he stood in there, made a throw, knowing he was going to get hit, threw it accurately, was outstanding. And to me, that was what was most impressive about Stroud's game as a rookie, was the number of times, quick release, couldn't even finish his throw, and he's throwing a 15 to 20 yard deep out on point. And you just haven't seen that as much this year. And so when you go back through the Texans film, I think Bobby has dialed up some open scheme play throws that have been missed. I think the offensive line has struggled in picking up any sort of trickeration up front. And that's not just a personnel thing. That Bobby probably deserves some of the blame for that as well, right? From a preparation standpoint. And it feels like their pass protection has been attacked in certain ways. So that puts way more pressure on the quarterback who's in year 2, and he hasn't been great this year. He's been okay. Can he put it all together against this Chargers team this week, C.J. Stroud?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big challenge. They have – this is a team where it makes perfect sense that the Chargers are favorites on the road, despite being a wild card team, because the Texans just do not look capable, or have not looked capable, of rising to this kind of challenge for quite a while. And I really think the only way of that happening, I don't see an obvious fix coming down the pipeline for offensive line woes, for a general lack of talent across the board, obviously outside of Nico Collins. But the only way of bridging that gap is C.J. Stroud deciding, I'm going to play unreasonably better now that it matters. Doing that ability that Mahomes has demonstrated to just flip a switch and say, okay, now it's for real. I'm going to show up even more and better. That's the only way I think the Texans can do this.
I want to talk Justin Herbert for a minute here. Remember early in the season, not only was he battling injuries, wasn't really playing at the highest level, and that they were busting out J.J. McCarthy type of stat lines, right? 15 of 25 for 140 and no interceptions. Herbert ends up as PFF's number 4 graded quarterback, right behind the 3 most common MVP candidates this year, right? Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Josh Allen. And then Herbert's right behind that trio. 23 touchdowns, 3 picks. We've talked a ton through the years about his ability to take care of the football, and that remained, but the big-time throw percentage went up. And look, the Chargers' biggest question mark to me coming into this year was the receiving core and how this offense was going to mesh, right? You've got Greg Roman coming in. He likes to run the ball, QB run game. Will they get enough from the pass game? At times this year, it felt like they didn't have enough weapons, but with Quentin Johnston coming off a 13-catch outing.
Who all of a sudden, thigh injury, and was downgraded, I think, downgraded out of practice effectively yesterday.
Oh, he's out now?
Well, no, not out of the game, but was downgraded out of a practice. All of a sudden, the thigh injury appears to be a potential problem for him.
Because that's where, his emergence, along with Ladd McConkey being uncoverable, right, which is, not expected, but, he was a really good pick at the top of the second round there. Pass game's rounding into form here for the Chargers with Herbert running the show.
No, Quentin Johnston all of a sudden became a big factor in this offense. So, a thigh injury randomly popping up and throwing his game into jeopardy is definitely a concern for them.
Didn't practice yesterday with the thigh injury and illness.
Yeah, but the thigh injury thing, I think, it wasn't sort of he was never going to practice. I think he was late downgraded to actually he's not going to be practicing today.
Great.
Yeah. So that's a potential problem for him.
And I'm not even saying that you would definitely be fully relying on him, but you're starting to get a little bit more from other weapons.
Yeah,
to complement what Ladd McConkey's done.
The thing about Quentin Johnston is, as much as he's not been good for the majority of his NFL career, he's big, strong, and fast, and you can't just ignore guys like that, even if they're not, viable, or if they haven't been massively productive weapons. If you're focusing on Ladd McConkey, by definition, you are leaving a guy like Quentin Johnston on an island one-on-one with somebody, and you have to respect the fact that he's big, strong, and fast. And if you put, somebody that can't handle that out on an island against him, that's a potential big play anytime. Now, will he catch the big play when it's thrown his way? Who knows? But it's a risk, right? And it's a potential game-changing risk if you're going to take that and defend him that way. Now, if you take him out of the lineup completely, obviously that disappears, and you don't have to worry the same as you did when he was in there.
The other part, I think, from Houston's defense, the numbers are fascinating with Houston because they've given up some big plays, and I've rattled off all of the big plays that other teams missed.
Right.
Sometimes we call those unforced errors, right? And there's a lot of times EPA per play tells a really good story. It tells the totality of the plays, what happened, but a lot of times the defense doesn't deserve all the credit for it, right? The number of big plays that other quarterbacks have missed, not even under pressure. They haven't even necessarily been pressured. They've just missed these big throws. There's several of them. And so that's why the Texans actually have the lowest completion percentage allowed on 10-plus yard throws at 39%, which is interesting. It's a stat I like to look at, like how difficult our defense is making it to throw the ball beyond the sticks and down the field. And the Texans statistically are up there, but I can't get out of my head the number of busted coverages. And look, I know every team has those, but they just feel a little bit more significant with Houston. So they give you a couple opportunities per game. And if that's Ladd getting behind the defense, or if Quentin Johnston can play and he's getting behind the defense, how often will Justin Herbert be able to take advantage of those?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big factor. Like, it feels like this game could be a tight, low-scoring affair where both defenses are in the ascendancy. Equally, like, when Justin Herbert is your quarterback, we talked about him before being streaky and being able to catch fire and just being unstoppable. Stroud's the same. Like, he's capable of doing that as well. So it's a game. It's one of these weird games where it could be like 6-9 at the half, and then the second half explodes and we get, 40 more points in the game overall.
A couple individual matchups to watch. The Georgia connection. Kamari Lassiter at corner against Ladd McConkey on the other side, both Georgia guys. Lassiter brought him up a few weeks ago when they were playing the Dolphins. The idea that he ran 4.6 at corner, but 70 PFF grade, one of the better rookie corners this year, up there with a lot of other good rookie corners. He's had a nice season. Second rounder, despite the low 40. Joe Alt, who's been fantastic in pass protection for the Chargers, had to move to left tackle in last week's game, but going up against Donnell Hunter and Will Anderson, you got some good matchups up front there as well in this game. And then game flow wise, what you said as far as, I could see it being tight, and then coming down to what happens in the second half. I think big time, high end storyline wise, Jim Harbaugh in what could have easily just been a rebuilding year for the Chargers, gets them to the playoffs, and Houston, after seemingly loading up on it was a young ascending team, loaded up for a Super Bowl run. And for me, a couple weeks ago, I was saying, I still believe in Houston. They just haven't hit their ceiling yet. I've soured on them because I don't know if that theoretical ceiling actually exists for Houston. So I'm definitely lower on them than I was even just a few weeks ago as they headed into those games against the Chiefs and the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, I still think they're capable of high-end play, but I think it's very much contingent now on C.J. Stroud just taking over and deciding, like, I'm not going to let the problems impact this game. I'm going to overcome them individually.
And Nico Collins, right? Nico's capable of putting together that eight catch, 150-yard outing.
And I think that connection is capable of doing that, but that's a very difficult thing to ask to happen in the playoffs against the better teams. Like, the Chargers have had one of the better defenses for the majority of this year. The nature of the game, offense is capable of doing that on any given occasion, but it's not really sustainable. Like, it's not a long-term game plan. I don't really imagine a world where even if Stroud does it in this game, I can't see him doing it 3-4 times straight and winning a Super Bowl doing that. I just think that's unrealistic and too difficult to ask him to do. But I can see it happening in a game. I mean, he could do it one time.
All right, man. Do you want to make picks?
Sure.
Chargers by 2.5 here. Over-under is 42.5. So that's from our friends over at FanDuel. 42.5, kind of low, especially for a dome game. And so what you described, maybe this, slugfest, low-scoring first half, or maybe things explode in the second half, certainly a possible game flow.
Yeah, I will go with the Chargers. I mean, that line, it's there for a reason. I just don't have confidence in the Texans.
The other thing I like to do at playoff time here, I'm also going to take the Chargers. If it's a chalk weekend in the AFC, meaning the Chargers, well, this is a 4 versus 5. The Chargers are favored, though. If the Chargers win, Bills and Ravens win, we get that epic divisional round Bills-Ravens matchup. But the Chargers go to Kansas City. So this, if you're the Chiefs sitting at home on bye, are the Chargers, not that there's a team you don't want to see, but this is probably the best game they could have. You Denver, maybe.
I mean, the Texans is the easiest team they could face, I think. The Texans or the Steelers, the Chiefs win without even thinking about it. The
just
other
because
teams,
we saw it a couple weeks ago, and you assume that's going to stay the same?
For the Chiefs.
We just saw the Chiefs easily take care of the Steelers.
I think they
Texans
would anyway.
A couple weeks ago.
I think either of those two teams, I just don't think that they have what it takes to beat Kansas City.
But the division game, both teams,
division games and Baltimore and Buffalo, I think, are at least live underdogs against Kansas City.
And remember, we reseed. So if Denver, the 7 seed, wins, they're automatically going to Kansas City.
Yeah.
If all the favorites win.
I mean, we've talked about
Chargers
it
or Texans
for half the season. I think Denver is a surprisingly difficult out for Kansas City, and the Chargers have played them tight as well. Like those division games, I don't think are a joke if either one of them is the one that Kansas City ends up playing. And then obviously Baltimore and Buffalo are the two theoretical best teams in the AFC outside of Kansas City. So any of those four, I think, it's a test for Kansas City. Steelers, Texans, that feels like just a walkover.
Playoff game a couple years ago where Chiefs killed them.
Right.
All right, you, me, and Harry all taking the Chargers here by 2.5 on Saturday. And then Saturday night, Pittsburgh Steelers at the Baltimore Ravens, another game that we saw a few weeks ago. Ravens favored by 9.5 here. So another story of a team stumbling into the playoffs. 4 straight losses for the Steelers, a little different from Houston. Houston, it's not that they lost every game. It was just every time they played a good team, didn't really show up. Pittsburgh went from, hey, this team can actually do damage in the playoffs this year, to now the narrative around Pittsburgh's same old team, same old 9 or 10 win Mike Tomlin team with, they can't do anything in the playoffs. But I think I said a couple weeks ago, of all the matchups, the familiarity against Baltimore, they do generally play Baltimore and Lamar Jackson pretty well, even though the Ravens handled them a couple weeks ago. Ravens by 9.5 here Saturday night, over under 43.5 per FanDuel.
Well, that's the thing. It's like which rerun of the season are we going to get? Because the first time these two teams played, it was, really tight game. Pittsburgh's defense did a really good job, and we were kind of coming out of that game saying the Steelers generally have done the best job against Lamar Jackson of anybody in the NFL, right? They do a really good job. They knock him off his game. They make it tight. Russell Wilson's the kind of quarterback that can potentially take advantage of that, and that's how Pittsburgh could win. And then the second game, none of that was true. Like Lamar Jackson just torched them. They didn't slow him down at all. They cooked, and the Steelers had no answer for that on offense. So if we get a rerun of the first tight game, then it's interesting. If we get a rerun of the second one, it's a formality, and the Ravens march on. The only potential difference really in the second game is, George Pickens theoretically is back. Now, George Pickens was back last week as well and dropped everything thrown his way. So if you get George Pickens actually in one of his, I'm going to make a big difference positively in this game, then maybe. If you get the George Pickens from a week ago where he's just absent-minded, dropping footballs and like a net negative on the offense, then you don't, how does Pittsburgh keep pace?
Yeah, My oversimplification of that first Pittsburgh matchup, when you go through the film, it's like, I don't think the Steelers did anything special.
Sure.
They played a lot of single high. They covered well, right? They made the windows tight. Lamar Jackson had no big-time throws per PFF in that game. And then you come back week 16, Lamar Jackson's, he's 15 of 23 for 207, but 3 big-time throws, right? We're talking like a deep out along the sideline. We're talking a tight window, throw in the end zone. So 3 big-time throws. Again, if Lamar is just, hits some of those throws, it completely changes everything. But Pittsburgh generally does a good job of just making the margins a little bit tighter for Lamar and the Ravens, right? How many times do we see the Ravens against teams and you say, how do you cover all of this, right? How do you cover Mark Andrews up the seam, Rashad Bateman behind the defense, Zay Flowers in space, and I know he's banged up. And then how do you stop Derrick Henry on the ground? And how do you stop Lamar Jackson running the ball? And then, oh, by the way, he's winning from the pocket and outside the pocket. How do you stop all that stuff? Coming out of Pittsburgh games, you say, well, they generally did. They generally do a good job. But Lamar made some special throws. in Week 16, and had one of his better games.
There are games where Lamar Jackson, it's just off. Where it just shows up, and for whatever reason that day, it's like Lamar's missing throws he normally makes. And they're few and far between, but they do show up. And the first Pittsburgh matchup was one of those games where in the first quarter, Lamar actually had a bunch of throws that were open, and he was missing guys, and he, not connecting on the throws that he generally connects on. And I don't know if that gets in his head, and he's just therefore from that moment on going to have one of those slightly iffy outings, and makes it easier to beat the Ravens in that situation. Doesn't mean they won't win anyway, but it can be tough. But that's basically what Pittsburgh needs. And Lamar's had quite a few of those games in the playoffs, and this has been.
Oh, we're going to get to narrative time here.
This has been the narrative of his career, is that, he has games where he doesn't really show up, where he's not the same guy, and quite a few of them have happened in the postseason. My point being, I think Pittsburgh basically needs one of those games for them to win this game. I don't think that their defense, good though it is, can force him into that. I think they need the help. They need him to just have a game where right away it's like, Lamar's missing a couple of throws. And then, the defense can start doing its part. But, if Lamar shows up, if MVP Lamar Jackson shows up, I don't really see a way to win this game for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, not the way they're trending right now. The offense being inconsistent, from a run game perspective, Russell Wilson not hitting some of the deep shots that he hit before, George Pickens not catching the ball. I think, by the way, the first game was in Pittsburgh. When they were in Baltimore, it was a 7-point game going in the fourth quarter. Baltimore gets a pick six, start running away with that game. I think Baltimore's a better team. Pittsburgh does play them kind of tough. Of the way this is probably the best matchup for Pittsburgh, given the fact that they're reeling. No,
right.
If they went to Houston,
yeah,
what would we say? Two teams that are someone's got to win here.
Houston was the best matchup. Outside of Houston, this is as good as they can do.
Just because of the familiarity.
Yeah, exactly. Which is to say, you're overmatched, but at least you're going up against a familiar foe, and it's a division game. And sometimes all bets are off when you're going the form book. That cliche, the form book goes out the window because it's a divisional game. That's the most that Pittsburgh can ask for, right? The team we're facing is a lot better than we are, but at least we know them, and sometimes you can just offset that by the fact that it's a division rival.
Baltimore also, we talked a lot about their defense really struggling early in the year. Even just a lot of the season-long numbers aren't great in Baltimore, but if you start to look at the last 6, 7, 8 weeks, Baltimore's defense has been much better. Nate Wiggins played pretty well as a rookie, had the pick 6 last week against the Browns. Marlon Humphrey's having a really nice season. Ardarius Washington. I've joked that this is the year of 2017-18 draft takes coming true, right? The Sam Darnolds and Baker Mayfields of the world. Ardarius Washington was a PFF favorite. Me, Mike Renner, probably put him too high on the draft board, but somewhere around 40. Hasn't done much in his career until this year, and it does seem like Ardarius Washington always making plays on the ball. So those are just some guys to keep an eye on from a Baltimore perspective. But Russell Wilson goes from, hey, he's kind of elevated this offense and turned it around, to come back down to earth. He's come back down to earth these last few weeks. Can Russell Wilson put together, a big game? Because they're going to need to create some chunk plays, because that's what he was bringing to the table that Justin Fields wasn't early in the year.
Yeah, and it's Wilson and George Pickens combined. That combination was what was unlocked with Russell Wilson coming into the lineup as the starting quarterback. And obviously Pickens has been hurt, but then he was back and dropping everything. That connection needs to fire. Otherwise, I think the Steelers have basically no chance. They need those big plays. They need those contested catches from Pickens. They can't have him showing up with drops. He had 7 targets and 1 catch against the Bengals. That's ridiculous.
And I don't know, because anything that hits a guy's hands isn't classified as a drop. So
right, but he had at least 2
but 6 hit his drops. Right, 6 hit his hands. And a couple of them were knocked away or whatever. 5 or 6 legitimately hit his hands, right? That if he came down with it, that's George Pickens. He comes down with that, but he just didn't in that game.
And most of those were not contested. It's not like he finally caught the bad end of variance of being a contested catch receiver. He just dropped passes that were thrown to him.
And so you want to talk Lamar Jackson narrative stuff? Playoff time, you get into this. Here's players' legacies on the line. This is what we all talk about. Lamar's awesome. He's fantastic. 41 touchdown passes, 4 interceptions. Very well could be in line for his 3rd MVP. But there some similarities to where Peyton Manning was at points in his career where Peyton Manning would put up ridiculous regular season stats, go one and done in the playoffs, not come through in the playoffs until, he finally did win a Super Bowl in 2006, which is his 9th year in the NFL. So where do you stand on Lamar and look, they won a playoff game last year against Houston at home. But then Lamar, 3 turnover-worthy plays in the AFC Championship, only scored 10 points against the Chiefs.
Yeah, look, Lamar Jackson is an incredible player and, could well be a 3-time MVP by the end of this year. He's having arguably the best year he's ever had. But it is impossible to argue against the idea that he has not been that guy in the playoffs for the majority of his career, right? Now, it's not to say it hasn't ever shown up, but most of the time it hasn't. His PFF passing grade for his career in the playoffs is 55.7. That's crap. Like, that's not just, it's a slight step backwards. That's garbage. So, and his rushing grade is only 77. Like, the MVP caliber player that we know and love has not really been a factor in the postseason. And that is an undeniable fact. Now, is it a thing or is it just a noise thing, right? Is it variance? Is it like, is it actually a narrative or is it a fact, right? And that's what but this was the same with Peyton Manning, right? The narrative was, well, Peyton can't win in the playoffs. Like, tough teams knock him out of his rhythm and he's too soft and all these things, right? It became a narrative thing. And eventually Peyton Manning won the second ring and all that goes away, right?
The funny thing with Peyton is he never actually played well on any of his runs either. He just, but they did win 2 rings.
Right. I mean, then the flip side of that, like the opposite side of that coin is Eli, who for the majority of his career was like the definition of mid, but went on 2 all-time playoff runs, knocking off the greatest team that ever played. And so Eli Manning's a Hall of Famer now based off like 8 games, right? So it goes both ways. But right now, Lamar Jackson is trapped in this world where the narrative on him, no matter how many MVPs he wins, is we can't do it in the playoffs until he does it in the playoffs. Yeah. So he's legitimately under pressure now to show up in the postseason because it hasn't happened. Again, I don't know if that's just coincidence, but there's no point arguing it. Like, there are people out there arguing that he has been perfectly fine in the playoffs, which just isn't true.
Yeah.
Like, you can find small stretches or individual games, but as I said, his PFF grade for the entirety of his postseason career is 55 as a passing grade. That's utterly atrocious. Like, that is
especially relative to the baseline that he set.
Yeah, that is not playoff Lamar Jackson. Let's put some like passing numbers to that. His yards per attempt in the postseason is 6.8. He's at 7.8, something like that. Where is he? He's actually way higher than that now, right?
I have 6.8, 6 touchdowns, 6 picks, passer rating of 75.7.
But he's 8.8 this season.
11 big time
So he's 2. His playoff career is 2 yards per attempt lower than his current regular season baseline. Right?
11 big time throws, 11 turnover-worthy plays. So yeah, it hasn't been great.
Yeah, I mean, it's been bad. Like, it's a bad baseline.
We're talking 250 dropbacks here. It's not a ton. So yeah, doesn't mean it's what's going to happen going forward, but it's something to keep an eye on. I think for me, the bigger question is the Ravens as a whole. Like, what team do I trust to take on good teams more than the Ravens? Just the Chiefs, pretty much, right? The Ravens last year and this year, when they go up against good teams, not only do they beat them at, handily. They beat good teams by 10-plus points more than any other team in the league. Don't check them. I didn't check that number, but it feels like that, right? Isn't that the truth? They whooped the Lions last year and the Niners and every good team that set before them. So they are equipped to do the 4-game stretch, right? The 4-game stretch where they take on Pittsburgh, Buffalo, perhaps Kansas City, and then the NFC Championship. Can they go on a Super Bowl run? Absolutely. Want to see if they can do it. They're fully equipped. They're fully equipped to have this offense that is unstoppable, a defense that's playing much better. Ravens are capable of making this run.
Yeah,
and I'll say when we get to the Buffalo game, I mean, there's points where this has felt like Buffalo's year, right?
Sure.
I fear for Bills fans in round 2. Going up against Baltimore. Baltimore gets through Pittsburgh. I fear for Bills fans because I think the matchup is in Baltimore's favor and that they could beat the Bills in round 2 pretty easily. Not easily, but I think they might, make some sad Bills fans this year.
I mean, I think any of those teams are capable of winning it all, and it's just
I agree.
They're unfortunate that this is like this is a year where there are multiple elite teams in one conference, let alone the other side of the bracket. So yeah, like, and this is why narrative stuff in the postseason sometimes gets like disingenuous. Is like sometimes they're just really good teams, and you're not going to beat them every single time unless you're Kansas City. But most of the time, that doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that if you run into a really elite team like 2-3 years in a row, there's some fatal flaw with your team. Like that, it's not unreal. Like if you flip a coin 3 times and it comes up heads 3 times, you're not like, I've got a weighted coin. There's something wrong with this, right? This is physically impossible. That's well within the bounds of like normal chance. So for a team like Buffalo to just not win 3 straight times against, a Kansas City or whatever, again, not freakishly abnormal, just like that's how hard it is to
a couple plays here and there
to win these games. So look, I think Baltimore is absolutely capable, and they've shown it already, of beating any team in the NFL this year, of being unstoppable when they're on song. The only thing that they're fighting against is they have not done that in the postseason yet, whereas we have the faith that Kansas City is able to just flip a switch and turn it on because they're on the way to a three-peat right now. Baltimore's working against the opposite assumption, right? The assumption right now is until you show me that you're going to do what you do in the regular season in the playoffs, I'm not really going to assume it's going to happen. So start now.
Yeah, and I'm just curious to see if the Ravens can just play their game, right? They get up early, Derrick Henry in the second half. That's another new added factor that they haven't had in the past. So looking forward to it, man. I'm not trying to look ahead too much, but if it is Ravens-Bills in round 2, I think it's going to be a couple epic games here in the AFC. All right, Ravens favored by 9.5 here against the Steelers.
9 is a lot. I'm going to go with Pittsburgh just because I feel like they can't get blown out as badly as they did last time.
I'll take Baltimore to cover it still, and Harry's going to take Baltimore as well.
Are you capable of catching the child up based off the postseason?
I don't know.
If you sweep the playoffs, can you catch him?
Maybe. We're gonna have to keep track by hand.
Yeah, the cavemen.
Absolutely. This is ridiculous. Don't have the app doing all the work for us.
Mm-hmm.
Denver Broncos at the Buffalo Bills. We're at Sunday now, so we got 2 games Saturday, triple header Sunday. It starts at 1:00. Bills favored by 8.5 here at home against the Broncos in our 2-7 matchup. Again, if Buffalo wins, probably playing Baltimore the following week. If the Ravens win, if Denver wins, they're definitely going to Kansas City as the 7 seed.
Yeah, this is the game.
Jim Kelly, John Elway.
Yeah,
playoff rematch.
Jim Kelly, John Elway. Everyone was kind of bummed because we wanted to see Joe Burrow and the Bengals go to Buffalo, but I think it's kind of meant that everyone's sleeping on this game, which is actually pretty fun. Denver's defense is legit. They have arguably the best pass rush in the NFL. They have Patrick Surtain on the back end, who's a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And then for the majority of the time in the second half of the season, Bo Nix has looked really good. I mean, he made inroads on a Rookie of the Year conversation that was dead and buried at the halfway point. In the second half, people are like, wait, Bo Nix? Bo Nix might be Rookie of the Year. Now, I think that was maybe a little bit too far, but the point is, Bo Nix and the offense have become serious factors as well. This is not a walkover for Buffalo.
No, it's not. I think I like where Buffalo is this year, right? I was saying a lot of the same stuff last year. The last couple years, they've taken more pressure off of Josh Allen generally. There's fewer games where it's like, hey, everything else is failing. Break the Josh Allen glass. It's emergency time. He's got to run the ball every third down. They've found different ways to win, and I do think one of these years, that strategy with Josh Allen is in the Bills is going to pay off on one of these runs. What I was saying about the fear thing is the Ravens do match up against them pretty well in round 2, but to get there, Buffalo's got to get by Denver, the defense, the pass rush, and what they've been able to do with several players creating pressure. Nick Bonito and Zach Allen and Jonathan Cooper, they are just good across the board as far as a defensive front goes. But Josh Allen's also been the best in the league at sack avoidance. And I just wanted to talk about that for a minute here. Pressure to sack rate, where the heck is that? I don't even know if we phrased that the right way when we made up that stat years ago. Only 8% of his pressure dropbacks is he sacked. And I saw somebody bring up this point. I mean, he was only sacked, what was the total? 14 times this year. Those are like Dan Marino type seasons. So you've got cyborg quarterback.
The offensive line, according to PFF, has only surrendered 4 sacks.
Yeah, and
that's insane.
And that's a QB stat. That's a QB stat, not an offensive line stat, right? They give up pressure.
Well, it's both, but yeah.
It's far more QB than the sack stat is more QB than offensive line. I hate offensive line sacks allowed. You remember how we graded it, right? You say this is a -1. The guy's completely by him. Whether it becomes a sack, a hit, or a hurry is all on the quarterback and the scheme.
Yeah, but
it's a QB in a system stat, right? You need to have a place to throw the ball, and the quarterback needs to get rid of it. I'm not saying he's running around avoiding sacks all the time. That's not really what sack avoidance is.
I mean, it's both. Like, if you have a garbage offensive line, you were going to hemorrhage an awful lot of sacks, regardless of who your quarterback is. Equally, if you have an amazing offensive line, you're probably not going to give up many sacks, even if your quarterback is not tremendously good at sack avoidance. So I don't think it's either or. I think they are both major factors in the stat. So I think Buffalo's offensive line allowing merely 4 sacks is both a reflection on how good their offensive line has been this year and a reflection that Josh Allen has been superhuman at avoiding sacks. This game features 2 of the top 4 offensive lines in PFF pass blocking efficiency. The Broncos are number 1 in large part. Again, this is your system part. Quarterback, offensive line, and system. Bo Nix, generally has a pretty low average depth of target. Ball comes out quickly, and he's pretty good at getting rid of it. So that all goes together. Denver's good offensive line. System is that kind of system. And Bo Nix, you put those 3 things together, and you have an offensive line that's only given up 98 total pressures over the course of the season and has the best pass blocking efficiency in the game. Buffalo's is similar. They're at 134, whereas the worst teams in the NFL are like well over 200.
Trying to find a stat. Oh, here it is. Sam Schwartzenstein, just to back up the sack and Josh Allen's ability to avoid negative plays this year and how important it is. Those are good stats by you, both offensive lines, not giving up a ton of pressure or sacks. So Sam has a stat here. Sacks EPA, like he calls it SCRAC. SCRAC EPA.
SCRAC?
Scrambles and sacks. SCRAC.
Okay.
What? That's good. So if you combined EPA gained lost, right? EPA on scrambles and sacks combined. Across the league, it's almost certainly negative, right? Because most quarterbacks will have, 30 sacks or some big number, and most sacks are pretty bad for your EPA, and not every scramble is even positive. So almost everybody skews negative when you combine those 2 numbers, right? And it's some level of QB mobility and getting rid of the ball or whatever. Josh Allen's the only QB in the league with positive SCRAC EPA, Sam, scrambles plus sacks. And I will say, if there is one somewhat blind spot in the PFF grading, it's that maybe there's not enough negative effect on QBs that take sacks. There's a negative effect, but maybe not enough relative to value, right? And so that would be one of those hidden areas that I think is a Josh Allen stat, but also a Joe Brady stat, and they're James Cook and Ty Johnson, and using those guys out of the backfield really well. They've done a nice job of getting the ball out of Allen's hands, quicker, faster, relying on yards after the catch more than ever, and they're just not taking negative plays. And so I think that was just to me, that's a massive stat, because even just like 2 weeks ago, Denver sacked Joe Burrow 7 times. And not all those are pass rush. A lot of that's, hey, they cover really well. He's got to hold the ball, and he's got to take a negative play. Allen has not done that, and he's done that way better than a guy like Burrow throughout his career.
One of the best comps, actually, or comparisons, contrasts is the word I was looking for that is Josh Allen versus Baker Mayfield this year. Josh Allen's pressure to sack rate is 8%. Baker Mayfield's pressure to sack rate is 25%. So 3 times effectively more often when they're pressured, will that turn into a sack?
That's why I'm saying that one's more QB driven, because it's when you're pressured.
Well, specifically because Tampa Bay is in the top 4 of offensive line pass blocking efficiency numbers. So they're in the same group as Denver and Buffalo, the teams we're talking about now, but that's resulted in 40 sacks for Baker Mayfield versus 14 for Josh Allen. That's the quarterback difference, right?
Yeah.
So in this comparison, you've got 2 very good pass blocking offensive lines, And then when they allow pressure, you've got a quarterback like Josh Allen who has been superhuman at avoiding sacks. And you've got a quarterback like Baker Mayfield who tends to skew towards getting sacked in those situations. Like we can all picture the classic Baker Mayfield play of like pinballing around in the pocket and eventually getting dragged down for a sack. That's the difference, right? That's part of where the quarterback makes a huge difference.
So yeah, I think it's a big part in this game, especially for a Denver defense that, again, gets pressure from a lot of different places in a lot of different ways, and tied to their coverage unit as well.
Yeah, but Bo Nix has been really good at that as well. Like these are two strengths.
College.
Yeah, these are two strengths. Quarterbacks that are both very difficult to bring down and create negative sack type plays. They've both been spectacular at that.
I'm just checking the Buffalo weather because you have to
20 degrees and partly cloudy.
Yeah. And I was going to say Saturday, though, I see snowflakes.
Snowflakes.
Monday, I see snowflakes.
Well, this is like if you've
Sunday, though, it's clear.
You've seen the map. The entire country is set to freeze this weekend. And obviously Buffalo tends to be a place where it freezes bad. So
I see a high of 32.
There you go. But anyway, this game is not – none of the games I don't think are going to be particularly affected by weather.
They're not. Maybe we'll have to wait till Divisional Round to get some weather. But probably, unless the Ravens get upset, probably the last home game for Buffalo. Anyway, anything else in this game specifically that you're keeping an eye on?
I'm curious to see how Buffalo's defense does. I mean, the offense has been – it's been hit or miss, but it's been more like how much they need Josh Allen to be Superman over the year. So you've got obviously that element. Does he need to be that against Denver's defense? How much can he do? But then you've got Buffalo's defense, which has been lit up at times this season, has been really good at times this season. A lot of that has been injury dependent, how healthy they are in a given game. But like Bo Nix, in a lot of ways, brings similar threats to Josh Allen. Now, in a lot of ways, he doesn't, right? They're very different players, but he's a scrambling threat the same way Josh Allen is, right? One of the ways he's been able to avoid sacks has been taking off and scrambling, and he's got like 400-plus yards scrambling. He's led the team in rushing several times this season. Bo Nix has been able to keep drives going and keep the offense on the field and, buy themselves a lot more opportunities to make plays in an offense that is not as explosive, is not as high threat as a team like Buffalo's, but he keeps them on the field pretty well by extending those drives, by making plays scrambling, by avoiding the negative plays, always giving them, third and manageable as opposed to third and death. So, I'm curious to see how Buffalo's defense does at slowing down Bo Nix.
Yeah, and I saw, maybe it was Brett Coleman, someone else mentioned it, like every January I'm always a little worried, is what he said. Always a little worried about Buffalo's defensive interior. And I think there's something to that, right? They've had games throughout the years where they don't like to put 8 men in the box a ton, and they'll give it up on the ground or whatever. I don't know if Denver is equipped to really take advantage of that, though, with their rushing attack. Below average running attack as far as EPA per play goes. Running back by committee, they had these spurts where they can create some big plays on the ground. But like you said, there's been a lot of games where Bo Nix is the leading rusher as a scrambler. It's not really a run-heavy Denver team. I don't think that can take advantage of Buffalo up front.
No, I don't think that would be how they have joy if they have it in this game.
All right, man. Let's make some picks here. Buffalo by 8.5. By the way, I didn't even realize the split here. The first 3 games are all AFC, and then we're on to the NFC. Buffalo by 8.5 here. Sunday at 1.
I'm going to go with Denver, keeping it closer than that. I think Buffalo will win, but I think Denver will cover it.
I am too. And Josh Allen legacy stuff, I mean, just still looking for that Super Bowl. I don't think this game – this is not the same as Lamar Jackson's narrative. I don't think this game affects it maybe affects it if he gets bounced, but I don't think this game really affects anything for Josh Allen. He's generally played well in the playoffs and been
Josh Allen needs to go to Kansas City and win in that game that's his narrative.
I mean, if Buffalo gets through this game, you're talking about having to go to Baltimore and go to Kansas City. Yeah. You're set up to make that epic type of run and go play, the NFC champion, of course, in the Super Bowl if they can pull it all off. Before we get to the NFC, got to tell you about our friends over at Circa. We'll have some content coming out based off of our weekend at Circa. It was great. I like what it says on the screen here. The time of your life, Circa Resort and Casino. We did have a great time. Saturday game, Sunday games, watching the whole slate. 8 games at a time was outstanding. Great setup, and they took care of us from Legacy Club to Barry's to the whole setup. Watching the games, really appreciate all of our friends over at Circa.
Yeah. One note of caution though: it will ruin the experience of showers for the rest of your life. I have taken several showers since returning home, and every one of them has made me sad that I don't have Circa showers.
Plus, it's
in
so
my house.
cold now. It's terrible. Yeah.
But I have my shower's fine. It's normal, right? It's perfectly acceptable shower. But now, having experienced the showers at Circa, it's like this is unacceptably pathetic.
Pristine
I
water
need to
pressure.
have Circa shower in my house somehow.
And we even talked to some of the execs over there, and they said thank you. They're like, thank you. We put a lot of time and effort into making sure we have good showers.
The GM of the kind of group was like, we had days worth of meetings about the showers. And I mean, look.
And you could tell. You could tell that the time and effort was put into
there are times,
the entire hotel room.
There are times where meetings spiral out of control, right? And we have a bunch of meetings about nothing that nobody actually needs to be sitting here talking about. This was if it was multiple days of meetings about the showers, they were well worthwhile because those showers are the greatest showers I've ever experienced.
The chat wants you to just remodel your bathroom. So,
I mean, sure. Look, if you told me
already done it.
If you told me that at the end of that experience I would have a Circa shower in my bathroom, I will rip that thing out of the house right now and start doing it. I will go into debt. I will take out a loan. I'll do whatever it takes to get that shower in my house.
I like it. All right, let's get to the NFC. Starts Sunday at 4:30. Game 2 of the Sunday tripleheader. Packers at the Eagles. Eagles favored by 4.5 here. The biggest story in this whole deal is Jalen Hurts in concussion protocol. He practiced yesterday, limited participation. That's usually how you come back from the concussions. I'm going to assume that he'll be back out there on Sunday.
Yeah, I think we have to assume that at this point. It's.
But he hasn't practiced in 2 weeks. This will be his first 3 practices here.
Right. I don't think that's a big deal necessarily. It's obviously a huge deal if he's not able to go. But if we assume he's back out there, Philadelphia looks like one of the most dominant teams in the NFL. Their defense is nasty. It can make plays up and down the defense. The back end propped up by those young rookies. Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, those guys have been phenomenal on the back end. The defense looks incredible. Vic Fangio has rounded that group out into a really, really formidable unit. And then the offense, when they're healthy, or at least healthier, it's really difficult to stop. They've got the best offensive line in the NFL, one of the top 2 anyway. Obviously, Saquon Barkley put together like an MVP conversation season, 2,000 yards, the 9th guy to do it. A.J. Brown is unstoppable when he's on form. Devontae Smith is an amazing playmaker. I mean, this is a very difficult offense to stop. So they're elite on both sides of the ball.
Just to pull out a number that I think describes Barkley and the way the Eagles' run game has been this year. Overall, if you just look at positive EPA plays on the ground, they're like middle of the pack, 13th. They're not great, but number 3 overall in EPA per play on actual runs. So they're actually dead smack in the middle. When you just look at running back runs, so Saquon, Gainwell, whoever, 39% essential positive EPA. Let's call that success rate. That's 16th in the NFL. So down for down, Eagles run game, if you're just looking at success percentage, it's not great. Number 3 in EPA per play. Those are the 50-yard plays that happened in week 1 in Brazil, right? The 50-yard plays, the 60-yard runs that Saquon has been known for. The fact that they always have that possibility.
Yeah.
They always have the A.J. Brown down the field possibility. Devontae Smith, big plays. To me, that's what makes the Eagles so dangerous. They could play this slow, methodical style and get to 3rd and short and push it, but then it's the big plays and all of the second half running that Saquon's done, and that's what beat up the Packers in week 1, and I think that's what's going to make the Eagles so dangerous.
Well, this is kind of like this style of running back was used as a stick to beat somebody like Barry Sanders with, right? Like, he takes too many negative play. Like Walter Payton is a better running back than Barry Sanders because he always fell forward, never die easy, always gain positive yardage. And number 1, that's not really true. Number 2, the difference between the two is like 60 yards in a season or whatever, which when you factor in, okay, on the negative side, you've got like 60 yards here. And on the positive side, you've got, look, it's Barry Sanders, right? Saquon Barkley has always been that style of player, which is when you're debating him, it's like, he's always trying to bounce it outside. He's always looking for that home run hit. And on a bad team, that can be a problem because the holes aren't necessarily there, and he is trying to bounce everything outside, and he's turning what isn't a good situation into a maybe worse situation, trying to make it into something positive. And that's why when he's with the Giants a lot of the time, you're like, he's obviously amazing, but like it's not making that big of an impact. But suddenly you put him behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, and you are routinely getting him through to the second level. So suddenly now that the situation's already good, and this home run ability and the inclination to try and turn it into a home run at any given situation is what turns 7 yards into 72 yards and a touchdown. And that's how you get to 2,000 yards. And we're talking about, is he an MVP? Like, his skill set is a catalyst for an even better run game. It's a turbocharger for the offense. Like, even though, as you said, on a down-to-down basis, like their run game might not be significantly more efficient, succeeding on any given down. When it succeeds, Saquon Barkley is able to turn that into a dramatically more positive play.
Yeah, and that's how he's always been, right? He was like, that was the scouting report for him at Penn State. And like you said, if you don't have as many big play opportunities in a Giants offense, you don't feel that as much. That's where the fit with the Eagles has been outstanding. So one of the guys trying to stop that, Edgerrin Cooper on the other side, we've talked about him a ton on the show, and I think the rest of the league's kind of raving about him as well. Hasn't played a ton of football this year, but an absolute hammer against the run. Run stop percentage of 12%, which is outstanding for a linebacker. PFF run defense grades, great. I mean, he's making a ton of plays at or behind the line of scrimmage. I do wonder how much that aggressiveness, because he just flies downhill. I wonder how much they can use that aggressiveness against him and using play action, getting the ball behind him.
And only just basically playing full time. Like literally the last 2 weeks, Minnesota and Chicago are the only 2 games of his season where he's basically played every snap. Technically started the game before New Orleans, but was still playing basically the same number of snaps that he's always played in the season, which is to say far from 100%. But then the Vikings game, where he had an absolute ton of tackles for loss, like 4 of them, I think, in that game. And then the Bears game, first 2 games of his entire season, where he's played every down. And it is difficult to overstate how much of an upgrade that is. Like,
I loved Cooper's
he was already the best linebacker they had, but there was like 50% of the snaps where you were taking him off the field and deliberately downgrading. So now you got better on 50% of your defensive snaps over the last 2 weeks. That's going to continue in the playoffs.
I think it's huge in a game like this. I think, the Packers defense, though, still, probably better up front and, more stout against the run than they were in previous years, but still kind of have those lulls. And it's exactly how I described it in Brazil in week 1, right? It's just gap controls off sometimes. And that's what makes Saquon Barkley so dangerous. You mess up one assignment up front, and that's when he can take it to the house. So I think the Eagles' run game has a chance to be dangerous. Cooper has a chance to, shut it down, create some of those negative plays. And then, if there is a rust factor with Jalen Hurts or whatever it might be, like he's got to make some throws outside the numbers. If there's been a weakness with Philly, it's been inconsistency with that passing attack. And I thought it was interesting that a Kenny Pickett, Tanner McKee-led offense, maybe not against great teams, but, they made some plays down the field that maybe, Hurts was a little inconsistent making in previous weeks.
Yeah. One blow to Green Bay is like they were planning at some point on having Jair Alexander back, and that's not happening anymore. I mean, he's been shut down with a knee injury and almost certainly going to miss the rest of the season. Like, I guess if they make it to the Super Bowl, maybe. But they're not getting Jair Alexander back, who I think is theoretically still their best cornerback. Obviously, that's an impact when you're going up against a guy like A.J. Brown or even Devontae Smith. So, they've been rocking with Carrington Valentine, with Keyshawn Nixon, who I think is more of a slot specialist at his best. That's a weakness now. Like this, generally, I think Green Bay is a very strong roster, top to bottom, and don't have too many weaknesses. That's an area, though, where you don't love the matchup relative to what they're facing.
That is where I think maybe Philly wants to come out firing. Get Hurts a rhythm, get him involved, kind of push Saquon to the second half. Try to get a lead and let him really break their back in the second half, because I think you can attack those corners, and I think you can attack the middle of the field with, the way Cooper works downhill and, works some play action behind him. I'll be interested to see if they come out firing, because the Eagles also have a lot of those games where it's, slow start, trudging through, and then it is second half they kind of run away with things. I don't know if they want to, mess with that too much here as the favorites.
Yeah. And then the other element obviously is, can Green Bay's defense just hold up against that offensive line for Philadelphia? Like part of the success of Saquon in the run game is and Jalen Hurts as well, when he's out there, it's just how good that offensive line is. And, they've responded from like the loss of a Hall of Fame center and Jason Kelsey, things like that. They've lost personnel, and they've been one of the few instances where a team has plugged in the replacements, and it's kept on trucking. Now, obviously, Saquon is helping that, but like this has not been the decline in this offensive line that was potentially on the cards if they didn't get those transitions right. They look really good, so Green Bay's defensive front has to hold up against that.
A battle for first team right tackle here between Lane Johnson and Zach Tom.
You're just going to ignore Penei Sewell, huh?
I would say Penei, but people are arguing. People are arguing about them.
Green Bay over the season have one of the best yards before contact per attempt rates in the NFL, according to PFF.
Really impressive for just a no QB run threat. Usually the teams that are up, like Detroit's up there because they've got a great run game, but it's impressive for teams that don't have the QB run threat to be up there.
No, their defense.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about that.
No, they've been one of the best run defense in the NFL in terms of getting to the running back early.
Oh, I got you. Sorry.
So going up against this offensive line, it's strength on strength.
Yeah, so it should be a good matchup up front. I'm a Philly believer here. The way their defense is played too. They showed some issues a couple weeks ago against Washington.
With
they've
backup
got
quarterback.
No, I'm saying like defense, Philly defense.
Okay.
Against Washington's offense. Philly's got the best EPA per play on 20-plus yard throws by a mile. So that this is when you if you were to describe Fangio's defense in like 5 words, it'd be no big plays, ever. That's the 5 words. No big plays. That's what they do, right? And Green Bay doesn't have Christian Watson now, the other unfortunate injury from last week. So that's what I'm keeping an eye on. Can the Packers create any semblance of big plays? Because a lot of times against a Fangio defense, it's like take the underneath stuff. But at some point, you're going to have to flip the field. And I think the Eagles are going to have a chance to score some points here. And so Jordan Love's got to play special. And, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, it's on those guys. Malik Heath, those guys to make plays.
No sooner had we decided maybe there was something to the Toyotathon quarterback, he stopped playing like that. So
Toyotathon's over.
Is it? When does it stop?
I think it goes through Christmas.
Christmas?
Yeah.
Then it's out? Okay, maybe it is exactly that then. But the point being,
when is Toyota
Jordan Love stopped absolutely cooking, and I think that can't happen if they want to win this game. Like, Jordan Love is capable of elite stretches of play and elite play within games. I think as good as Green Bay is, and they're strong across the board, maybe with the exception of corner now, I do think they are still overmatched by Philadelphia. Like, they are the weaker team basically everywhere. So the way to bridge that has got to be Jordan Love. If he doesn't play his best football, I don't think the Packers win.
Toyotathon is from, according to Google AI, November 15th through January 6th.
Oh,
so it runs through the regular season.
So then it holds.
What? He just got hurt last week.
Right. He wasn't playing well before he got hurt. He didn't play lights out against Minnesota. He didn't play lights out against New Orleans.
He was fine against Minnesota.
Fine is not elite. Fine is not he bounced back to where he was last season where he looked like the best quarterback in the NFL. There was a stretch at the beginning of Toyotathon where he looked like he just found that play, and then it disappeared.
I'll tell you what's interesting looking at Jordan Love's breakdown here. It kind of reminds me of the way I've described the Texans. Like there's this ceiling that exists out there that hasn't been approached yet. Jordan Love, when he went on his run last year, I'll just use PFF game grades just as a proxy here. 86, 91, 90, 83. He had 6 games at 83 plus last year. 83 is a really good game grade. He had a bunch over 90. This year, only 1 game over 83. And so Green Bay's converted a little bit to more of a Josh Jacobs run first type of approach. They're rushing over expectation in the first half is number 1 in the NFL. They've they've morphed into more of a run first type of team, taking some pressure off the passing attack, right? But we also haven't seen the high end Jordan Love. We haven't seen that yet. Whereas last year, that was what we were raving about. Was like, dude, he didn't miss a throw in this game and was making spectacular throws left and right. That happened 5, 6, 7 times last year. Has there been a game this year where you're like, man, this is on point, start to finish Jordan Love? So does it come out at some point, or did he just kind of like come back down to earth a little bit, in part because you've got this more run first type of attack this year?
What I think is the big difference between his run last year and what we've seen this year is last season, from the moment he started that run, where it was another one of those, a switch is flipped. And all of a sudden, he's gone from this like wildly inconsistent, wildly inaccurate quarterback where even the good plays were like not where he wanted them ball location wise, to suddenly everything was like he was just walking it out there and handing it to a receiver in the perfect spot, right? Yeah. He had 8 games from the moment that run started last season with multiple big time throws in the game. You know how many he has this year since the sort of midway
Doesn't
point?
Feel
same
like
area?
A lot.
One game with multiple big time throws, and that game was 2. So none of the 4 games that he had last season, 1 game with multiple big time throws, and that was 2. He's had like 2, 4, 6 total big time throws since that run, since the same point last year where he kind of flipped that switch and became that incredible big play machine. Overall, his big time throw rate is 2 percentage points lower than it was last year with basically the same turnover worthy play margin. Point being, Jordan Love has been fine this year. He's been good. He's had stretches where he's been excellent. What he has not been has been that big play, the big game hunter, where he's been able to make massive field flipping, game changing plays on a regular basis. And that was happening last season. I think they need that guy for the playoffs,
including in the first playoff game.
Yeah,
against Dallas, right? In that wild card game, they're blitzing him or he's under pressure on 3rd and 10, and he's back foot, putting it on somebody 20 yards down the field. I mean, he was spectacular at times last year. I do think they need more of that as far as if they're going to go on a run here. Mm-hmm. And the Packers are an interesting team where all 5 losses, 2 against the Lions, 2 against the Vikings, and 1 against this Eagles team, right? All the top 2. That's the top 2 seeds in the NFC. And then the 5 seed, who has the 3rd best record, the 2nd best record.
The Packers, actually, I believe, have 1 loss that wasn't within the division.
That's the Eagles.
Yeah. So they've basically
all 5 losses are against the 3 best other teams in the NFC.
They're 10 or 11-1 against teams that are not the NFC North.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they've been very good, but it's not exactly this like, can the Dolphins beat good teams type of question. It's like, can the Packers beat the best teams?
Right. Their season is, can the Packers beat number 1 seed type teams, right? Because those are the three teams that have beaten them this year. We're all vying for the number 1 seed right up until the end, essentially.
Last thing I just wanted to highlight here is the Zach Bond, and I know you can't reveal your votes
until Friday, tomorrow, apparently.
Well,
I thought it was all the way until awards, but apparently the All-Pro team gets announced on tomorrow, on Friday. It's the awards that get announced on NFL Honors. So MVP and that kind of stuff is NFL Honors, which is basically a couple of days before the Super Bowl. But the actual All-Pro team comes out tomorrow.
There's a good chance Eagles linebacker Zach Bond is named somewhere in and around the All-Pro team.
There is.
And so
very good chance when you factor in that you need to have 3 linebackers for the All-Pro team
yes.
in a league that is trending ever more sub-package.
You're saying just handing out All-Pros to extra linebackers the way they're doing it here. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying nothing.
You're saying nothing. But Zach Bond and then Nakobe Dean both have been pretty good against the run. Dean, he's got an even better run stop percentage than Edgerrin Cooper, who I was raving about earlier. So Dean has come on strong, and Bond has had an outstanding season, and the Eagles like to play the run with fewer players in the box, so there's a lot of pressure on those Eagles linebackers stopping Josh Jacobs up front. I think they're up to the task.
Mm-hmm.
Eagles by 4.5 here. Where are you going with this one?
I will go. Man, I think I want to say that Green Bay will keep it closer than that, but yeah. I actually think the Eagles might just be too strong.
It's one of those I would like Philly by 3 or so.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take Philly to cover. Harry will take the Packers. I like Philly to.
I think the Eagles in particular
go on a run here.
Are a significantly better team than when they last met.
Is there any fallout for? It feels like Eagles fans were just. There's some Eagles fans maybe waiting to be mad at Nick Sirianni. Others who say, "Look at his career record; he's outstanding."
Yeah.
Is there any fallout if they go one and done here with Sirianni and the Eagles?
I mean, it depends on the manner of it. If it's a really good game between two very good teams and they lose, I mean, sure, it's not like he won't take crap for it, but I think it's okay. Like in this world of, look, the playoffs are where the best teams are, and sometimes you're going to lose those games. If they just play like crap and get waxed by the Packers, then yeah, that would be, I think, quite problematic for him, because that would be a couple of times now where they've looked really good for most of the regular season, and then just completely laid an egg in the playoffs. That, I mean, he was answering questions about his job based off the collapse last year, like real ones. Basically, ownership came and said, "Explain this to me," and explained how you're going to fix it. And he apparently did a good enough job of selling that they were like, "Okay, cool, you're the guy, go for it." And he did. Like he offensive coordinator, defense coordinator.
Yeah, they fixed it.
Yeah, and they fixed it. It didn't carry over into this year. So kudos. But that's how quickly it can, like he already had that against him, right? That's almost like, a black mark in his record book somewhere. Like if this goes badly, this is not a clean slate we're dealing with. There's already some negative here that we have to factor into these decisions. So yeah, like, he at least needs a good performance, whether or not they win the game.
All right, man, let's get to the Sunday night game. Two more games to discuss here with the NFC. Washington Commanders at the Tampa Bay Bucks. Bucks favored by 3 here, the NFC South champs. They got all the way up to the number 3 seed here with the Rams' loss on Sunday. And the Commanders sneaking into the playoffs here. Not sneaking in, but surprising this season to get into the playoffs. Outstanding first season for Dan Quinn as head coach, and Jaden Daniels, the probable rookie of the year.
Yeah. I don't hear any Dan Quinn coach of the year buzz, which, I mean, I'm not saying he should win it, but his name should come up.
There should at least be some buzz.
Right. His name should be coming up more than I've seen it.
Do you rank those when you're voting for them as well?
Yeah. Every award is now a ranked choice of 5. So gone are the days where you just pick your guy and vote. It's now a ranked choice of 5, which have points attached to the ranking.
And you could argue all of the top candidates in the NFC. If you put Dan Quinn up there, Dan Campbell,
well, this is why
Kevin O'Connell.
Technically, it's mathematically possible for there to be co-MVPs still, but it's basically not. I mean, it's almost impossible.
Yeah, it was before because there's 50
before
voters,
you just needed an equal number of people to vote them first place, right? Out of 50. So if 2 guys voted for somebody random and then 4 each voted for the same or voted for different guys, those people shared the MVP award.
Yeah.
Now
it's not because people said I want co-MVPs.
Right.
It was just like the votes just added
now
up.
You need the points to add up to the same in a ranked choice of 5, which is mathematically possible but extremely unlikely.
Yeah. Washington's they've done a really good job to get to this point. I'm interested in this matchup because they played in week 1, and also Philly and Green Bay was a rematch from week 1. I don't know if you learned anything from week 1 in this case. It was
weird things happen in week 1.
It was also Jaden Daniels' first game. Like I feel like we could reference Philly and Green Bay week 1 because they were both, 2 playoff teams starting the season against each other. They're still playoff teams. Washington in week 1, I don't think was there yet, right? And it was Jaden Daniels' very first NFL game. And so I don't know if you learn a whole lot from that. I mean, maybe Tampa Bay crushes them again like they did in week 1, but I think this is a much closer game this time around.
Yeah, absolutely could be. I mean, a few things. Jaden Daniels has been spectacular. The offense has been really good. It has evolved. Cliff Kingsbury, I think, has done a good job. They are a very good team on that side of the ball. What is interesting to me in particular, though, has been, so I think when you get to the playoffs, potential weaknesses get magnified, right? Because you're going up against better teams generally, and the chances are your Achilles heel is easier to expose against better teams than it is against a lot of other teams where it just doesn't matter enough.
Agreed.
So let me read you PFF pass blocking grades for teams. Not so much the grades, but let me read you the teams in order and rank. Number 1, Denver Broncos. Number 2, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Number 3, Green Bay Packers. Number 5, Buffalo Bills. Number 6, Philadelphia Eagles. Number 7, Los Angeles Chargers. Tied for 7th, Baltimore Ravens. Are you sensing the theme here?
A lot of these teams are playing football still.
Yeah. Number 22, Washington Commanders.
Yeah.
So this is a team that has a notable step down as a team pass blocking grade. relative to most of the other playoff teams. I think they are the worst. No, the Rams are worse overall in this, but they are the second worst playoff team in terms of pass blocking grade as a team. And generally, Jaden Daniels has been outstanding at mitigating that, right? Again, scrambling has been a huge part of his game, and he's a more dynamic scrambler than even somebody like Bo Nix. It's been huge, right? He's been incredible at that. But again, playoffs, weaknesses get magnified. Does that offensive line finally start to actually become a problem against a team like Tampa Bay?
Yeah, that's a good question there. And Jaden, we're talking about this pressure to sack ratio or percentage.
Which for him, remember, coming in was catastrophic. Like that was the thing that everyone was holding up as like, I don't know, it's a big number that tends to be sticky from college to the NFL.
It's not great, but it's at the lower end it's at 22%. It's at the lower end of the scale in the NFL this year. But it's not actually Baker's level, right, that you had mentioned earlier, where he's
25 or whatever that was.
Yeah, he's at 25. Jaden's at 22. I mean, it's not a massive difference, but Bo Nix had been outstanding at that. Michael Penix was outstanding at that. Did Penix end up? Where did he? In his small sample size, I bet he was pretty good at it. I don't know. He got sacked a couple times here. Let me look really quick. But those guys, like the guys that were good at it in college, were generally good at it. But I thought Daniel's been better.
12 for Penix.
That's what it is. It is amazing how it is pretty sticky. Penix and Nix and Anthony Richardson were all three of the best over the last couple of years, and they're all 12 or under.
Right.
Doesn't mean you're going to be the best quarterback necessarily. It just means we can bank on this thing and develop the other stuff. In Daniel's case, every other advanced metric, whether it's QBR, which emphasizes EPA and running, whether it's just EPA per play, every other Jaden Daniels metric has been good, right? And has offset the sacks because of the way he scrambles and the way, I think the Washington game against Atlanta was very telling, and I think that's what Washington wants to do. And not to overrate one game, but the second half of that game against Atlanta, where they had the first two drives where they go 11 plays, 12 plays, and they have these 13, 12, 14 play drives, right? These long drives, and they were breaking out wing T, Jaden Daniels design runs, right? They were breaking out a few extra wrinkles and saying, Jaden, go take over the game. And now against a Tampa Bay team that is explosive, man. I mean, this is a team that's putting up a lot of points the last couple of years. Baker Mayfield, we always talk about his aggressiveness. Mike Evans' ability to create big plays. Jalen McMillan now creating big plays as a rookie third rounder. I think Washington wants to play this, hey, we want an 8-possession each game. And we're going to shorten this thing up, and it takes pressure off of our defense. And we can do that because we've got this grinded out run game, and we also have our break glass in case of emergency, just like Buffalo has Josh Allen, is we could put the ball in Jaden Daniels' hands.
Yeah.
And one more stat here. Commanders' EPA per play against the run, because our friends at PFF have done a really good job of tracking blitzes, not just on pass plays, but on run plays as well. The Commanders are by far the best running team against the blitz. And we know that the Bucs are going to come after you about 50% of the time. So the Bucs run blitz more than any team in the league. So there's this matchup here where I think Washington might be able to play this ball control game. Got to win in the red zone, which they weren't doing earlier in the year. Got to win in the red zone and keep it close and keep the Bucs offense maybe off the field.
How much of that is scrambles?
This is design run stuff.
Design run stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
This isn't. It should take scrambles out of it.
Right.
I hope. Let me double check.
Okay.
Let's go look it up.
But
that is where the way I described Daniels earlier in the year, right, is like he didn't just throw in completions to throw it. He would turn that into 5 and 6 yard gains.
Yeah.
He's been very efficient when it comes to that.
No, he has. He's been excellent at that. I am always curious in Tampa Bay games what kind of impact Vita Vea can make. I feel, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like his inconsistency on a game-to-game basis, on a down-to-down basis, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. I don't think it's laziness, but I feel like a player is like that talented, is capable of turning it on more when it really matters, because he is physically capable of doing it. His high-end plays, you watch them, you're like, how are you not the best player in the NFL? Like, you were able to toss aside 320-pound offensive guards or run them right over and make this look like a joke, right? Why does that only happen once in this game? Why does it not happen like every 3 plays? I do wonder if he's capable of going, okay, it's the playoffs now. This is big. Let's just crush. Let's just dominate. I was curious what Vita Vea's grades were in playoff football. They are better than his standard baseline. Now, he's only played like 240 snaps of playoff football, so it's not like we're getting, a season's worth of sample size here. But generally, Vita Vea has been better in the playoffs than he has been in the regular season. I wonder if you get a game where he just decides to wreck shop against an offensive line that, on paper heading into the year, looked rough, has been fine, but as we said before, is, lower third in terms of pass blocking, or lower middle third in terms of pass blocking, and could be a problem against a dominant player.
We were talking about that. Was it the fourth down the other day? We were watching him closely in the Saints game, right? And he had like one play where he's just depositing players into the backfield, and then it's like, all right, 4th and 1, just hold the point, and he's just shooting a gap upfield and getting out of position.
Some of it I agree is like decision making. It's like, why are you shooting a gap on the wrong side of a play to get into the backfield? It's never coming in that direction anyway. Like, just stand there at the point of attack and don't move. Like, play Grady Jarrett for a game. Late era Grady Jackson. Late era Grady Jackson, where he was like 425 pounds and his job was to just stand up, on a run play. Yeah. Just stand up and lean forward. And then 2 people have to occupy you just to stop you hitting the ground. And then that's all he did. He just stood there and occupied multiple gaps and stopped the run play that way, right? Do that on short yardage. That's all I need you to do. Don't try and get into the backfield. Just simply occupy those 2 gaps and that, 5-yard width area of space. And he doesn't. For some reason, too often, he tries to make a play that isn't his to make.
That matchup in particular, Tyler Biadasz, who's been just a good, dependable center through the years, he's been banged up. Don't know what his status is going to this game, or practice status was listed as questionable.
Right.
So I hate all questionables, because you got to dig a lot deeper to figure out what the prediction looks like. But he's questionable, and that could be just a massive matchup up front. Michael Dieter, the potential backup there for Washington.
Yeah, and the Bucs, look, they have some horses to cause problems. I mean, Vita Vea, we talked about before, leads the team. Second in the team in pressures this year. Has 50 pressures, is capable of those games. Yaya Diaby, one of the most underrated pass rushers in the NFL this year, has 65 pressures, has been a force as well. Like, he's a disruptive playmaker in his second year. They've got some players that can cause problems against an offensive line that is generally, it's been good, like, overall because of Jaden Daniels, but is a potential weakness.
I did look up the rushing numbers. So just running backs, this is wild actually. Just running backs running for the Commanders. So I'll take out even Jaden Daniels' designed runs. Their EPA per play is 0.22. And I know these numbers just sound like gibberish.
Abstractions.
0.22, which is really high for any sort of run play. The next closest team's 0.07. So they're like 3x the next closest team running against the blitz, and only 7 teams have positive EPA per play running against the blitz. It is actually, and again, maybe an injured Biadasz or not having Biadasz changes a lot of this up front for what Washington can do. But their run game has been essentially you're running into the teeth of the blitz, and it doesn't matter. They're designed well enough to get these guys into space and create big plays or create efficient plays. So that's one potential matchup. I do think what you're mentioning, the pass blocking, could be a massive issue. I really think this becomes from Washington's perspective, a lot on Jaden Daniels' plate, both as a runner, as a passer. And then from a Bucs perspective, we've got the potential matchup. Playoff
Lattimore versus Evans. That could be fun. You've also got, just from a quarterback perspective, like, you've got 2 quarterbacks that really have been shouldering the burden in different ways. But, like, Jaden Daniels has been doing that all season long. Last week, they were in trouble. Like, the backups, the shell of whatever remained of the Saints team had Tampa Bay on the ropes until Baker Mayfield just decided, no more. I'm taking over now. I'm going to make some plays. I'm going to drop some dimes, and we're winning this game right from this moment. Baker's done that quite a lot this year. And generally, early in his career, this was a weakness. Like, anytime Baker Mayfield got set up with like a 2-minute situation to drive and win, it's like, no chance. Interception is coming. Turnover is coming. Fumble. Just general Baker disaster is on the way. And that's how you got to like 0-43 in situations for his career where he was down 10 points at any point in the game. And then this season, now you're seeing like it's gone the reverse. And that's when he's at his best. When they're in trouble, has been the best version of Baker Mayfield. When the pressure's on, all of a sudden we're seeing sort of, Oklahoma Baker Mayfield, where he's like up back against the wall. That's when you're getting the best version. And then the finest example maybe against the Saints, they're down 10 and Baker goes, right, forget this. Now we're fixing this. He's been absolutely balling out in those situations this year. And maybe, is this his career year? Like, he had a really good year in Cleveland as well.
He's got career. If you look at touchdowns, if you look at yards, if you look at PFF grade, I think it's his highest in a whole bunch of different areas.
Yeah.
I saw people saying, PFF grades aren't great earlier, and I said they are for quarterbacks. If you're isolating the quarterback, they absolutely are.
Overall, his grade is just edged above the 2020 season. His passing grade was better in 2020, though. But either way, like, you can make an argument this is the best year or the best version of Baker Mayfield we've seen.
The number that stands out, though, because if you take out the turnover-worthy plays, he's got 25 turnover-worthy plays. Is that number one? But yeah, it's number one in the NFL, 3.6%. That's on the higher end. That's the game to me. Is Mayfield's had these stretches this season where end-of-half decision-making hasn't been great, where he's put the ball in harm's way. He did it. He had 3 turnover-worthy plays against Dallas. The last 2 weeks, though, no turnover-worthy plays against Carolina and against the Saints, and he had 90-plus PFF grades, really efficient games, almost a perfect passer rating against Carolina. When he takes care of the ball, he gets in these stretches where he's hot and makes a lot of good decisions, but he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games with multiple turnover-worthy plays. And so, to me, that's also the game, right? For a Washington team that I think can play ball control and essentially steal a possession, right? You have two explosive offenses, really. They've both put up a lot of points. But Washington might be able to steal a possession by their ground, ball control type of style.
Right.
If they steal another possession or two with turnovers, that's where I think it becomes tough for Tampa Bay. But the Bucs I think they're a little better team, trending in the right direction right now. I also think they have that go on a run ability, right? They could go one and done. They also have this Baker, Evans, Bucky Irving, all get hot and they go on a run here. So I think this is one of the games of the weekend here.
Baker has 4 PFF game grades this season above 90. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
60.
5 that are in the orange in terms of like below average performances.
Yeah, don't forget the red.
And a bad game. That's quite a wild roller coaster ride.
Yeah, the Carolina game, the first Carolina game where he was playing through injury and just firing the ball to the defense a couple times. So some volatility to Baker Mayfield's game. It's all landed at really good production, right? Not to try to take anything away from him, but he absolutely goes through stretches, like the Baltimore game on Monday Night Football, right? He's hot, and then bad red zone decision, right? So he's got to stay.
And 5 turnover-worthy plays.
In 5 total, right? And so he's got to stay on point in this game, I think, so that because every possession is going to matter in this one.
Yeah, every single one of those elite games in a season has 0 turnover-worthy plays in them. To an extent, that's it's hard to have a really high grade if you've got a turnover-worthy play in there.
But it's one of the stories, right? He's had both ends of the spectrum here.
Like if you get good Baker in this game, they have a real shot of winning. If you get Baker that's multiple turnover-worthy plays, kind of challenging.
It's going to be a good one, man. It's going to be good. Anything else to discuss here?
Thoughts and prayers to the people of Central Florida because it's going to get all the way down to 65 for this game.
I love that you've got the weather report everywhere here. Yeah, night's going to be cool, crisp.
Right.
Cool, crisp evening.
Mm-hmm.
No rain whatsoever.
Clear sky.
Oh, wow. It's beautiful football weather. Mid-fall weather, not January weather.
Yeah, not even mid, like early.
This is a rematch from the 2020 playoffs, by the way.
2020
This
playoffs.
is Bucs football team. Bucs versus football team was the first game on the 2020 Bucs Super Bowl run in the wild card.
This was Taylor Heineke.
This was the year that Taylor Heineke
had the best performance of anybody against that Bucs team.
The Bucs played Taylor Heineke, Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers, and Patrick Mahomes, and Taylor Heineke by far had the best performance of any of those 4 quarterbacks on Tampa Bay's Super Bowl run.
He had like a 92 grade or something insane. It was like
he was unbelievable.
Ridiculous.
They scored 23 points. They almost pulled the upset because of Taylor Heineke.
Taylor Heineke with a 92 PFF grade, 300 yards, Like five big-time throws, 0 turnover-worthy plays, and was a scrambling monster from what I remember as well.
He may have had more big-time throws than Breeze, Rodgers, and Mahomes all had combined.
Yeah, 46 yards on the ground, another touchdown, like 3 broken tackles, 3 10-plus yards, 6 scrambles. Like, he absolutely balled out.
Don't know
against the Super Bowl Bucks, and now is like a garbage backup that can't go on the field. You just don't know
what's going to happen in the playoffs. That's why.
This is back to did everybody screw up the draft with Joe Milton, or did he simply have the Drew Lock game a week later and now gets to sit down and never have the next game? Like,
the Taylor Heineke game also happened. Like with Milton, you're like, oh, it was against Buffalo backups. Heineke did this against the Bucs, who again went on to play Breeze, Rodgers, and Mahomes, and he played better than.
But it's the hilarious part of the NFL that I love, that you can just randomly show up and absolutely ball out, and if you time it right, people think it's a thing as opposed to just random week 1 variance, right? Like Joe Milton gets the benefit of now being able to sit down and never have week 2. Right?
I mean, Heineke did too. It's like, you just tough loss.
Right.
Tough loss against Brady and the Bucs.
And that earned him like a starting shot. Yeah. Like, that's the thing. If he'd come back the next week and played like crap, we never would have had the Taylor Heineke era. But because he didn't, because it was like, wow, look how amazing he was in a loss to the Bucs. It's like, let's give him a shot. Whereas Drew Lock comes back in week 18 and is Drew Lock again. It's like, yeah, clearly that was just a fluke, All
right. You'll make a pick here? Bucs by 3.
Bucs by 3.
Over-under's 50.5.
Ooh, I'm going to go.
2 high-scoring teams.
I'm going to go with the Commanders.
I'm also taking the Commanders. I hate this because I think the Bucs are the team that can get hot and go on a run here.
Get hot. Hot Baker. Hot streaky Baker.
Hot Baker. I'll take Washington, though. I also would lean under on that, I think. I just have it in my head that the run game here. Both teams, the run games are going to slow the game down just a little bit. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go Monday night. Minnesota Vikings at the Los Angeles Rams, of course. So Vikings favored by 1.5.
What do we do in our prize picks? Is that at the end, or is that?
I mean, you can do it now if you want. It's listed to go after this game.
That's cool. I'm just asking. Just asking questions here.
Did Janko confuse you with his reminder in there?
I'm just asking questions.
Vikings at the Rams. Of course, we've got the fires going on in the LA area. The NFL has stepped in and said they could move the game, could move it to Arizona if needed. They're keeping an eye on it. And thoughts and prayers with all those in LA who are, having their homes destroyed and being displaced.
Yeah, horrible situation.
But we've got the Vikings by 1.5 here, over under 47.5 per FanDuel.
Yeah, this is,
the 2 4-5 matchups are road teams favored. Chargers against the Texans and then the Vikings in this one.
This is fascinating because I think in most objective measures, the Vikings have been a significantly better team than the Rams this season. On the other hand, the Rams have been the team that up until last week against Detroit had handled Minnesota best and beaten them most conclusively of any team in the NFL this season. And now Minnesota has to come off the back of what must be an emotionally crippling defeat. Like, everything was on the line. The number 1 seed, a home field advantage, a bye week, bragging rights over the other number 1 seed vying team. All of it was on the line, and you had the biggest beatdown you had. And in particular, like in the second half, that game got away from them and became an absolute paddling, and the Lions just smacked them down. So you got to bounce back from that on the road, across the country, against the other team that beat you handily earlier in the season, which also came off the back of a defeat to Detroit. It doesn't get much more difficult than that from a Minnesota perspective. Like, that is a serious challenge to try and answer for the Vikings.
And then just to focus on the quarterback for a minute here, Darnold has silenced doubters throughout the year. And I'm going to reference the PFF grades again, just for perspective here.
Okay.
Early in the year, Darnold had 2 games grading under 50. One of them was statistically good. One, don't forget, against the Jets, he did go 14 of 31.
Right.
With no touchdowns and a pick in a London game, right? So it's not like he was pristine throughout the year. But since that point, and you had mostly good games. You had the Jags game, no touchdowns, 3 picks, 4 of which, 3 in the red zone, 3 all turnover-worthy plays. So he's had some bad games in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think with the Darnold, and this is where I've been guilty the last couple of years, Geno Smith, Baker Mayfield, guys that break out and then they have a bad game. It's like, okay, is this it? I'll ask the question with Darnold, can he bounce back from this? Because earlier in the year, he bounced back from subpar games. Like he was horrible against the Jets, came out against the Lions and went toe-to-toe with the Lions, right? He had the Jags game and then came back with maybe his best 4-game stretch of the season after that. But last week was awful.
Yeah.
For Darnold, for the offense, bad decisions, bad misses, untimely misses, everything. My question is, can Darnold bounce back here? Specifically Darnold, because I trust the playmakers. I trust Kevin O'Connell. Can he bounce back against a Rams defense where they should have some opportunities to make plays down the field?
He had the game that we talked about earlier where Lamar Jackson sometimes has them, where it's like immediately it's just off. He's just missing some throws. And I think that can affect quarterbacks, where right away when the sort of first thing you do is negative, it can just set the tone for the way the rest of that game is going to go. Now, I don't think you can ignore what the Lions defense did. And some people were. Like, when you were sort of analyzing that game at the time, people were like, it's just Darnold. Like, Darnold is the difference here. He is playing terribly. The Lions are playing well. Therefore, the difference in this game is Detroit. Or is Darnold, rather. But, like, Detroit's blitz defense is part of this. Yes, Darnold missed some opportunities in the face of the blitz, but you can't just ignore the fact that the blitz was persistent, overwhelming, and the Vikings did not have good answers for it, certainly late in the game, but really for the majority of the game. So it's all part of it, right? Like, Darnold definitely missed some throws, and if he'd hit on a touchdown early and the Vikings take the lead and they go up, and maybe we're talking about a different performance and a different overall result for Minnesota, but you can't ignore the factor of that blitz-heavy defense. And, yeah, it's a big thing. Like, he played badly. He had opportunities to fix that game and couldn't take them, and now he does need to bounce back. But the Vikings also need better answers. I thought Kevin O'Connell was outcoached in that game, and that doesn't happen very often. I thought both sides of the ball for Minnesota were outcoached in that game. The Rams offense, the last time these two teams met, that was another team where Flores' defense didn't have the answers. It couldn't stop them. It wasn't able to slow down that Rams team. Matthew Stafford was the guy making the Jared Goff plays, right? So this is a really difficult matchup for Minnesota. Like, if there's another team that's caused Flores problems, it's been Matthew Stafford and the Rams. So you're now going back-to-back against the two offenses that cause you the most problems, and you're going back-to-back. Your offense played like crap last week. It needs to bounce back, otherwise you're just in trouble. I mean, the same way I'm saying it's tough to what can you expect from a Sam Darnold bounce back? As I've said on the show many times this year, how do you figure out Matthew Stafford? Started the season slow. The Minnesota game on Thursday Night Football was a turning point, seemingly, for his game. That was the best game he had played to that point. That was the first game, right, where they had everybody back. That was a big part of it, right? He had 3 touchdown passes going into that game. He had 4 in that game specifically. He's had a couple 4-touchdown games. He had that Buffalo game where it was one of the best games of the season. Stafford going up against Buffalo, throw for throw, just unbelievable and outstanding. He's had other games like that throughout the year. Let me use passer rating for a minute. 4 games from week 11 through the Buffalo game in week 14 with a passer rating over 100, a 142, a 132. And then the rain game against San Francisco, game against the Jets, game against Arizona to finish the season. They didn't score 20 points in any game, and his passer rating was 83 or lower. Stafford's been crazy streaky this year. And now, look, the Rams have won those last few games, and that's what's intriguing about this team is that they've had this young defense kind of come alive. Jared Verse with, a lot of pressure, and Kobe Turner and Braden Fisk up front, and the Cam Kitchens at safety on the back end. They've got just a young team on defense, and all of a sudden, down the stretch, after the shootout with Buffalo, they've won 3 straight defensive struggles where Kyron Williams just always seems to make the right play at the right time, and they've run game and defense, right? So this Rams team has found a way to win in different ways where I thought they might be too Stafford dependent. I think in the playoffs they will be, right? But it's intriguing that they found these different ways to win in recent weeks. Now, it is worth reminding people of how that last game ended, because even though with a face mask, even though the Rams were incredibly good. I mean, Puka Nacua was unstoppable. He had 7 catches, I think 6 of which were first downs. Stafford was out of his mind. Kyron Williams played well. Like, the Rams were the better team in that game. But Minnesota was down 8 with effectively 2 minutes to work with, a minute and 46 on the clock. They are backed up. They're at their own 5-yard line. The next play, Sam Darnold gets his helmet wrenched off his head, like clear, obvious face mask. 2 people in the end zone looking right at it, didn't see a damn thing, and instead we're like, no, it's a fumble, it's a safety. Game over, effectively, right? Rams get another 2 points. Suddenly
we were robbed of excitement rather than...
Well, suddenly it's a 10-point game, which looks like, a multiple score game. It's like a full official beatdown. That drive may have gone nowhere, right? Sam Darnold might have made a mistake. It might have ended up that way anyway. He could have thrown a pick 6. Could have looked even worse, right? But the correct thing to have happened from that play was Minnesota moves 15 yards further down the field, and they're now starting their drive with a similar amount of time on the clock from their own 20-yard line, which is, with 1 score needed, right? A touchdown and a 2-point conversion to tie the game. So as much as I think the right result was what we saw, the Rams were the better team, they got the win. Let's remember, the Vikings were robbed of the opportunity to answer that with a potential score, and they've done that multiple times this season. That wouldn't have been inconceivable. So, it should be a close game. It's just this is not the opponent, I think, that Minnesota would have wanted to see.
Yeah, it's a good synopsis of what happened. And it was also a game after Detroit, even though it was a short week. It was in L.A.
Flu.
I don't know if there is something to the Honolulu flu thing. I mean, even if there wasn't, you set it up, right? Minnesota was coming off of, a playoff caliber game where Detroit gets to hang out now for a week and relax and, reset mentally, and Minnesota's going to come right back. They get the 1 extra day.
Right.
But they have to come right back.
The only good thing about that is they get the Monday game.
Yeah, and you got to play another playoff game.
Right.
Right? And look, it's
and the Monday game, by the way, screws them if they do get past this, because then they're going back to Detroit off a short week.
Yeah, then it's a shorter week. Right. Probably on the following Sunday they'll play.
Right.
So, yeah, there's something to the, coming off of a Detroit game where there's a physicality to it. But in Minnesota's case specifically, just like you see college teams have this roller coaster ride of emotions, it's a really emotional loss. And you got to come back and play a playoff game.
Someone in the chat there, Nubblex, points out a fair point that apparently the last time they played, so it was the return of Puka Nacua in that game, which again was why it was the first time the Rams
we
players.
thought he was going to be real limited.
Yeah. Well, no, they didn't even think he was going to play. It was they had just activated him like a couple of days before his 21-day return window thing. And they were expecting that to be like, well, they only just activated him. He'll play next week. And instead, they just threw him right out there. And not only did he play, but he was like the main part of the offense, and they fed him the football. Look, it's not like Puka Nacua. It's not like you hadn't seen him before, right? Like you knew what the offense looked like with Puka Nacua in it. So I think there's a limited amount to which you can say that's an excuse. But theoretically, they had prepared all week to play the Rams without Puka Nacua being on the field. And then it's like, oh, no. Puka Nacua was playing, and he gashed them. Now, again, maybe you could adjust to that at some point in the game, but still, theoretically, they at least know who's playing this time.
Yeah, I mean that's part of what I think makes the Rams dangerous. Kyron Williams out of the backfield, Puka in any game can go 10 catches and $150, and
right.
And Stafford in any game can just be like playoff Stafford. And the playoff history for Stafford with the Rams, they're in every game. They're aggressive. Of course, they did go on that 4-game Super Bowl run in 2021, so they could be dangerous.
The other element, obviously, with the 2 quarterbacks is turnover-worthy plays. Which one is going to put the ball in harm's way? These are 2 quarterbacks that are quite prone to that generally.
They're both top 5 total?
They both share the same 3.6% turnover-worthy play rate this season.
As Baker?
Yes. So let's put them all in the same bucket.
Let's just say turnover-worthy plays are going to determine this game.
They have combined 45 turnover-worthy plays this season, 21 for Stafford, 24 for Darnold, which equals the same 3.6% as a rate of their total plays.
This game's going to come down to turnovers and red zone, Sam.
These two quarterbacks will put the ball in harm's way generally in the course of a game. Does that determine this game?
One other stat that I think helps determine it. Vikings have the best EPA per play against the run with a light box, right? So they can play coverage and stop the run. They've been very good at scheming it up against the run. I do believe, and not that the Rams go as Stafford goes, but as Kyren Williams goes as well out of the backfield, and he's just very good at keeping them on schedule, very good red zone runner. Minnesota's been excellent at stopping the run, making teams throw the ball a lot. It's why I like Stafford's PrizePicks projection for his passing yards over 230-something, which I'll review in a minute again here. So I think we're going to see not necessarily a shootout, but a QB-driven game here from both sides, where both Darnold and Stafford have to take care of the ball and make some big plays. And I think Minnesota, I think the mental aspect of this is going to be really interesting for Darnold in particular, because Kevin O'Connell, suppose he's been a mastermind at all this stuff, right? Can he get, because you mentioned Darnold misses something early and then it spirals. How do they scheme it up early to get him some easy throws, right? I think this does matter. You talk about the receivers where it matters, getting them involved early. How do you get Darnold confident early so that he plays at his best? Because one of the best things about his game this year has been ice water, game on the line, ice water in his veins with the game on the line, get that Darnold back. And if we see that early, I think we're going to see this. Now the Rams are going to have to keep pace with Minnesota, and it could get into shootout territory.
Overall, I just think this is an incredibly challenging psychological test for Minnesota. I think Kevin O'Connell was embarrassed last week. That was maybe the first game this season where I think he's just been completely outdone by his opposing number. I think Sam Darnold was outdone last week. Basically across the board, Minnesota got undressed by the Lions, which was in a coin flip game. Like two number one vying teams. It was supposed to be the game of the year, and actually what happened was the Vikings just got their ass kicked. And the punishment for that is not only do you have, the pain and the psychological damage of getting your ass kicked by a top contender, but you now have to go on the road, period. You got to do it across the country to a team that's already beaten you this year, and a team, not only have they already beaten you this year, but the way they played Week 18, they clearly don't care that you might be coming to town again. Like, they rested everybody. They're like, we don't care if we drop seeding and have to play this team. We've already beaten them. Doesn't matter to us. So, that's a lot of psychological scars to heap on top of this team and say, overcome this now and go beat them, just to set up a rematch with the team that kicked your ass last week.
Just to set up what would be ahead for both teams, if the 2 and 3 seeds win, so if the Eagles win their game as 2 seed, Bucks win their game as 3 seed, the NFL always puts the 4 versus 5 game on Monday night because every matchup set except this final one. If it's chalk in the NFC, winner goes to Detroit.
Yeah. And
that's either Minnesota to Detroit for the third matchup or Stafford to Detroit again, as they played in the playoffs last year. So storyline-wise, it's outstanding. Of course, if Green Bay or Washington wins, things change and the winner would go to Philly, but or if Philly, whatever. Things could change. I'm just saying, like, if all the favorites win, Detroit's next.
I think the Vikings are a better team than the Rams, but I don't think that there's a single playoff team that is dealing with more psychological difficulty heading into this game than the Vikings are, based off what happened to them last week.
Well, let's make some picks here. Vikings by 1.5 here, over under 47.5. Where are you going to go?
I'm going to go with the Rams. I think that they'll win at home.
Continuing your Viking hating.
Wait, do we get Wit out if it's in Los Angeles versus Arizona?
Do you think that the home field advantage will matter?
I think I think the Rams win at home. I think if it's in Arizona, Minnesota wins.
Okay. Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Then I'm doing
There's
that.
no app. You could do Wit out.
There's no app.
It's our show.
Nobody can tell.
Yeah. I'll take Minnesota. Harry will also take Minnesota to win. I think they bounce back and potentially see how things play out, potentially set up a rematch. I'd be interested to see them against Philly if there's an upset in either Washington or Green Bay. If Minnesota goes to Philly.
Right.
Or the Rams go to Philly. I think that'd be it's a different matchup, right? Every NFC game is a rematch from earlier this year.
It's just fascinating for the Rams or for the Vikings because they've gone from, like, they were one game away from the entire playoffs having to go through Minnesota, from their only loss being to Detroit and then the Rams. But now it's like you just got beat down by a team that is a number 1 seed and you're this close to being out of the playoffs completely. Somebody said in the chat, 14-win teams aren't mentally weak, but 14-win teams rarely have the setback happen as the very final thing that happens to them before they wander into the playoffs. Like, usually a 14-win team is home and hosed at that point, right? They're on the beach waiting for the playoffs. They're resting people. They're chilling. 14-win teams have literally never gone up against another 14-win team as the final thing that happens to them before they go into the regular season finale and then get beat down.
Never got to find out how my 99 Jags would, as 14-win team would bounce back from their AFC Championship loss to the Titans.
Generally speaking, when 14-win teams lose, they're out of the playoffs.
Yeah.
Whereas Minnesota now has a chance to come back and see how they respond to that.
All right, man. Picks are in. We got a hard out.
Yep.
We got to talk prize picks. So let's unveil your lineup, and then we'll review mine as well. Don't forget, download the PrizePicks app. Use code CheckTheMic to get $50 instantly when you play $5.
Okay. My lineup, starting with quarterback Bo Nix for the Denver Broncos, but not as a passer. I've said before, the man has led the team rushing several times this week. I believe that will happen again, and he will therefore go for more than 24.5 rushing yards. Bo Nix will be a factor scrambling against Buffalo, particularly in the chilly weather up in Buffalo. Puka Nacua carved the Minnesota Vikings up last time, and they'll tell you, if you ask them, they'll be like, we didn't even know he was playing. How can we be expected to stop Puka Nacua?
Can't stop Puka.
He wasn't expected to play in that game. I believe, however, that is simply an excuse. And the real problem was they just couldn't stop Puka Nacua because Puka Nacua is better than most of the Vikings DBs. I believe that will remain the case in this game, and therefore Puka Nacua will have more than 74.5 rushing and receiving yards. Now, almost certainly all of that will be receiving yards, but still, you get a little hedge.
I was eyeing his rushing projection too.
It's like 1.5 or something, right? Yeah, it's the same. It's like the CeeDee Lamb thing. He gets one carry. I get that.
They're going to feed Puka with the playoffs on the line.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like Puka Nacua, I don't think that excuse is going to wash. I think he's just better than the guys you're trying to cover him with. And then finally, Keon Coleman. This is fun because now with PrizePicks, once you hit the playoffs and there's fewer games, you get more and more options to play with. So this one I hadn't seen before, or I hadn't used before anyway. The longest reception projection. Keon Coleman, I believe that his longest reception against Denver, despite going up against this great pass rush, great defense, Patrick Surtain, I believe that his longest reception will be more than 17.5 yards.
Probably against Riley Moss,
Against Riley Moss, but also when Josh Allen is running and he's scrambling and he's at the sideline, he's like, where am I going to throw this? Who does he aim at? Keon Coleman, deep down the field. Give him a chance.
Josh Allen's last pass was a beautiful touchdown to Keon Coleman on the scramble drill.
Just give him a shot. Throw it up, down the sideline, give him a shot to Moss, and then get your projection.
I like it. So that's your lineup for this week?
Yeah.
Looks good. If Puka works for you, he's going to help with maybe. Just give it a little review here.
Can't believe you just let that slide. Moss. You're just going to
I thought it was
ignore that.
In my head, I was like, that's sharp.
Yeah.
Keon's going to Moss. Give a little review here, and I'll do mine.
Bo Nix, more than 24.5 rushing yards. The scramble threat is real. Puka Nacua, more than 74.5 rushing and receiving yards. He's just better than the Vikings DBs. And then Keon Coleman for more than 17.5 yards as his longest catch.
I like it. Yeah, I'm going to go, I mentioned earlier, Matthew Stafford. I think it's going to become a shootout. So you and I working together. Matthew Stafford more than 239.5 passing yards. He's going to need Puka for that one. I got Justin Herbert in that first game going more than 1.5 passing touchdowns. I think they'll have some big play opportunities against the Texans. And then just going Van Jefferson more than a half reception. Just going to catch a pass. Pittsburgh might have to throw the ball more than they would like, playing from behind against Baltimore. So more than a half reception for Van Jefferson. So we're going to have some fun with that this weekend with PrizePicks. You can as well. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CheckTheMic. You get $50 instantly when you play $5.
Mm-hmm.
All right, man. We did it. Calibrated to a 2-hour show for the preview, no matter what. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Enjoy some college football playoff tonight. It's a great stretch of football. 2 college football playoff games, 3 days of NFL playoff action. So all sorts of fun over these next couple days. Also, don't forget the link in the description. You can get some of your merch. Everybody should be getting that hoodie. A little spoof on Dare. Stop engaging with hot takes. Grab your Check the Mic merch in the description below. All right. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again on Monday morning with more Check the Mic.